The Steve Cooper Classic ended with a comprehensive defeat for the Foxes on Friday night at the King Power, as Chris Wood and Nottingham Forest come away with all 3 points in a 3-1 victory for Nottingham Forest. I'm going to break down the game today for you all. Very interesting game from a tactical perspective. Some things to admire from Leicester, but ultimately an absolutely abject second half leads to a fairly easy win for Forest in the end. Well played to you guys. You did well, and I've got to say that many of the warning signs that were given to the Leicester fans did come true, i.e. that if Steve Cooper went for it, he might come unstuck. We'll look as to why that happened over the course of this analysis. Now, just before I start, something you might not be aware of is that when I do these videos, there's also an accompanying guide that goes with them. And if you go to Fox's Talk, here, I'll give you a little brief preview. You can see that not only do you get all the information, but most importantly, you get things like this, where I break down the actual clips, which you can watch for yourself. And I really strongly recommend that you take a look at that, because a lot of the stuff that I'm going to show you still images. And let's be honest, it's much nicer to see the video and actually see it playing and understand what's going on. Unfortunately, I can't do that on YouTube for obvious reasons, because I don't have the rights to the Premier League. But luckily on the forums and things like Substacks, you can do it. So do go over there. And if you want to know how to do it, there'll be a link below in the comments in the description. Just click on that and you can take a look. And I recommend actually having them both open at the same time. So when I talk about something, you can go and see the video playing out. You can understand what I'm talking about. Okay, that little kind of crash course in how to best enjoy the content aside, let's get into the post-match analysis. So this is the story of the game. It finished 3-1, and you can see that quite interesting game, actually. So we had 65% possession. So this was one of the first games in fact, it probably was the first game this season where it felt in a Premier League like a game last season in the Championship where we bossed the ball. However, because we were playing a Premier League team, this time round, every time we made a mistake, we got absolutely punished for it. And in fact, we probably should have been punished even more than we did get punished. So in the end, though we scored a goal, our XG was pretty low, and Forest had 1.77. And to be honest with you, I'm surprised it's that low, because I can remember a few other opportunities they had that I think were even better opportunities than the goals that they scored. So their game plan really works out well for them, and it was brilliantly executed. However, some things of interest, we did have more possession and obviously more passes. But if you look at the match momentum, even though we lost this game, this actually shows that for the most part, we probably had more of the momentum and it wasn't as crazy. What I mean by that is that in all of the previous games that we've played, these bars really dipped quite alarmingly down, showing that the opposition had crazy amounts of momentum and essentially we were hanging on. Now, as we kind of get into this game, we kind of shot ourselves in the foot with this one and gave Forest goals. So the kind of spoilers from when we get to the end, but I think that it's actually a good blueprint to work with here. But ultimately, the players and the team let themselves down with some individual poor performances that just completely gave the game away. But I don't want to take anything away from Forest. They're high up in the table for a reason, and they proved it on Friday night. So let's look at the starting lineups. And for Leicester, well, there were rumours circulating during the day. I've got to say, myself and some of the other Foxes fans were talking about it, and we couldn't believe what we're hearing. The rumours were that Fatawu was going to start and Ricardo was coming back into the team. Are you crazy? That sounds like we're going to be going back to the Enzo Maresca system. And in fact, that is what we did. So this is what I didn't expect it. I really hoped. I thought we would see Fatawu, but I did not think we'd see Ricardo. But Ricardo Pereira out of prison and ready to come back into the Premier League. Long overdue, in my opinion. And though he had a bit of a mixed performance, I will say that if you've been frozen out for, this was the 9th game of the Premier League season, he hadn't played a single minute before this, you maybe shouldn't expect that player to hit the ground running. And I still think he did well in patches. As for Forest, they named an unchanged lineup. Now, that's not a surprise given that they've been in good form, but I was a bit surprised because they played on Monday night. So they had a quick turnaround. And despite that, I've got to say, full credit to them. They never really looked tired. They had hard work throughout the team and they did well. So respect to Nuno for getting that team fit and well drilled. Because actually playing their style of football can be quite taxing sometimes because you're defending deep quite a lot. Well, not deep, but a mid-block and you're doing a bit of pressing. So, you know, fair play to him. That I actually thought was pretty impressive and very solid. And yeah, I've actually got a feeling with them that even though they've got players that are injured, that those players are going to find it hard to get back into the team. Notably, Morgan Gibbs-White apparently could have played, although he wasn't in the squad. But why would the manager risk it when your first team's in such good form? Quite impressive from them. So let's talk about the first half. And In classic Leicester City fashion, we had one good half and one abysmal half. This one was the good half. Although there were some mistakes in it, there was also a lot to love. So coming into this game, what was interesting about us going for the 3-2-5 Enzo Maresca system is that this was going to make for a really interesting tactical battle, a sort of real yin-yang. So you've got the possession game, which is what we're going to play on the left, and you've got the counter-attack, which is what Forest are going to do on the right. This actually comes from kind of like Pro Evo or an old FIFA game, but I think it's a really good example to show you what's going to do. We're looking to make those additional passes and try and cut teams apart that way. Forest are going to be faster and more direct, not have as much of the ball, but try and be more clinical on the counter. And this is an interesting debate because obviously we won the title playing counter-attack. But since Guardiola especially has come into English football, the game has changed. And the way that I would kind of summarize it is this. If you try and play the possession game, your ceiling, as in how good your team could possibly be, is much, much higher because you'll be able to control games, dominate them. And when you get good, it means you're less likely to lose games on average. However, it's hard to actually get that working and to execute. And you tend to need to have really good players and you have to spend a long time coaching them. So it can work, but it's difficult. Now, the counterattack is fairly simple. And I don't mean that to be insulting, not at all. Reminder, Leicester City won the Premier League by playing a counter-attacking system. It's actually pretty simple, easy to instruct the players, and quite easy to execute. You don't even need players that are necessarily that technical. However, the disadvantage of it is that your ceiling is potentially not as high. So, for example, a counter-attacking team has not won the title since we did it. Maybe you could say the Conte won it the year after us, but I think they weren't quite as counter-attacking as we were. Otherwise, what tends to happen is that other teams will turn up against you and they might also play to counter-attack you. And then you're going to struggle to break down their low block. And that's in fact what happened to Leicester post-winning the title. The following season, a lot of teams started parking a bus against us and we had no clue how to break them down. And so we've been on a journey from then till now, really, trying to find a way that will ultimately get us back to being where we really want to be. It's been a long and arduous one, hasn't it? So starting a game, and we notice immediately that Ricardo is playing in the Enzo system, the inverted fullback. So here we can see that he's taking up his position next to wings. I'm going to go through quite a bit of detail here to explain how the system works. You can tell that I've been wanting to do this for a while. And actually, there was a lot to love about it. Also, some things that need a bit of improvement. So I want to discuss both those things. So here you can see that because he steps into midfield, Forest have got 4 people around, but we've got 5 people. And that means you've got a free man to find with a pass. And that essentially is the key to this system. However, we've got to remind ourselves that coming into this game, we knew that Callum HudsonOdoi is a really dangerous threat from Forest. And we've got to say that if it wasn't Chris Wood, CHO would have won man of the match in this one. He was really, really good. Now, I wasn't expecting Ricardo to be in the team. So I thought that the key battle in this game was going to be Callum HudsonOdoi versus Fatau and who was going to come out on top. But you see, if you play this system, on paper, we should be a bit better at setting up. So here you can see that we're in the defensive phase of the game. Instead of Ricardo being here next to wings, he's actually moved back here to be the right back. So you can see there's a 4 line at the back here, and we've got 4 in midfield, and there's your 2 up front. And you can see there's Ndidi who's come back, and he's going to now play in the 4-4-2. Buonanotte is like the secondary of the 2 that push up front. So Ricardo's dropped back to right back. And what that means, as you can see here's for Fatau, is that when he's on the ball, a little bit against what Southampton tried to do to us last week, is that on paper, in the defensive phase, we can double up against HudsonOdoi to make us a bit safer. Now, of course, as the game would transpire, he still managed to get the better of us. But what I'm trying to explain from the kind of conceptual idea is why with this system, the inverted fullback can actually be quite useful. So why use an inverted fullback? Why even try that tactical approach at all? So you're trying to get the extra man in midfield to make it easier to pass the ball around the opposition, which is going to help you generate chances. If you use a fullback to do that, it means that when you're defending or on transition, like there's a counter attack, you have a player that knows how to play right back. Whereas, for example, let's say that you had Skip in that position. Skip has never really played right back, so he might not know exactly where he's got to stand and knowing how to keep in line with the rest of the back 4 if we're trying to play offside. And so what on paper that would allow you to do is have more possession and control of the game, and that means you can set the tempo. And if you think back to the Championship, pretty much every game, even if we won, lost or draw, it was rare that, for example, we were responding as the other team. It was normally, how is the other team going to stop Leicester? Not the other way around. Some exceptions, but in general. And if you think about it, that's a perfect way to summarize some of the best teams in the land at the moment, like Man City, Liverpool, and Arsenal. So another thing that we do as part of this system, here's our old manager, is we play out from the back. Now, not everyone's a fan of this, but I've got to say that in modern football, it's becoming one of the most important things you can do. It's probably the biggest change to football over the last 20 to 30 years. I'm personally a big fan of it. It is hard to get right. I don't think you have to do it all the time. But when you do it, I will show you here why it's so good and why it generates chances. So Mads has got the ball here, and you can see that Okoli's here, and you can see that Forest are going to try and start their press. So there's 4 men around, and you've got to be a bit careful as what you're going to do. But what's interesting with the way that Maresca got us to play is he would even actually instruct sometimes Mads to make a ball into the risky area. So for example, here, he might actually be better off passing it to Fast because there's less men around. But he's actually trying to pass it into Okoli to try and make the Forest players snap on him, which is going to generate space behind him, which we're going to exploit later in the move. So it comes to Okoli, turns his body shape, and he waits a bit and waits here for Alanga to chase him down. And this is something that I don't think Okoli got enough credit for in this game. A lot of people are asking for Vestergaard back. But you can see here, he shimmies onto his left foot. And look at this, despite this really tight angle, he manages to get this pass away to Justin. Now that Justin's got the ball, you can see already that there's 2 Forest players that are out of the attack. So that means now it's up to JJ what he wants to do. He could start driving forward. He could try and be really aggressive and step on the gas right away. But the idea is that we're trying to generate these numerical superiorities right away, and means that we should have more space to be able to utilize moving further up the field. What he decides to do instead is to play the ball back into like the quarterbacks, which is both Harry Winks and Ricardo in this particular game when you're playing the double pivot. Winks plays it into Ricardo, and here's another example of sort of both playing out from the back, but also this concept of like baiting the press. So Ricardo, again, by receiving the ball here, there are 4 Forest players around here, and they're going to try and snap in and win the ball off him. But Winks has played that deliberately because we are trying to actually provoke them into coming this way. Enzo Maresca, he said that when he did his kind of final thesis for his A international license, that he wrote about how he thinks in the modern game, at the top level, it's a bit like playing chess when you're playing football and moving the opposition pieces in such a way that you can exploit them. And this is the example of that. So because these 4 players are going to try and snap to Ricardo, but luckily we know that Ricardo is cool and calm under pressure, he can play the ball back to Winks. You might think, okay, well, what's that achieved? Well, this is what it's achieved. Although Winks doesn't make this pass, if you look at how close these players are, that means that there is now a passing lane that's open to Buonanotte. So that will mean in the future, once we kind of get an understanding of the flow of the game, that we're going to be able to play these like fast balls that break the line. And this would take 4 players out of the Forest defense, giving us an even better chance of attacking. So this is the entire theory behind the system. It's very difficult to pull off. It takes a lot of understanding and training and rehearsing on the training pitch. But when it works off, it can be pretty deadly. And there'll be some examples of that in a moment. Instead, Winks decides to play it back to Justin. Justin plays it back to Okoli, and now we're back to this 3-2-5 shape. And again, you might feel that in this example, what is it really achieved? But I would kind of argue against that. So why play out from the back or try this kind of system in general? So you're trying to stop the opposition from having the ball. Notice that in the entire sequence, Forest didn't touch the ball once. That means that you can keep control of the game. If you can do that for 90 minutes, it means you're going to tire out the opposition by making them chase the ball. And it means that you can shift the opposition's defensive shape around to create openings and opportunities. It also means, as we've seen here, that you can advance up the pitch as a collective, maintaining defensive and attacking structure. So what's good here is even if we were to lose the ball, you've got a lot of men back in decent positions to cover. Equally, if we want to attack, this player Okoli's got multiple people that he can pick out with the ball, and at the moment he's not under that much pressure. So it works both on both vectors. And it means that overall, as you get better as a team, you're going to play in a consistent manner, but it's going to be hard to stop you. And that's what we found out last season. But it does take a lot of time to get this system well rehearsed. So now we've kind of got into that shape. How are we going to build up from here? So here's where it gets interesting. So the entire philosophy here is that we want to try and find a spare man. So here we have got both Winks and Ricardo both ringed it, and we've got Okoli on the ball, part of the same sequence. And he is going to try and play the ball here through to Winks. But what he's going to do, again, he's going to wait, and he's trying to wait for the Forest players to come to him. Because once they get closer to him, it's going to give these players on the ball more time. So he plays it to Winks because the players charge him. And now Winks is going to play the bounce pass, a very quick one into Ricardo. And that means, as you can see here, because he's dragged his men away, Ricardo can now display this ball through the channels. And this player who's arriving back on the scene is Vardy. Vardy's playing as a false 9. So you see, now that Vardy's received the ball, what's going to happen is that these two centre-backs are going to be attracted towards him. And now you can see exactly why this system can be pretty exciting. Because now that Vardy has the ball, look, you've got the 5 Leicester players that are attacking, and look how high up the Forest backline has pressed. So this means if Vardy plays the correct pass, we could get in here very easily. Now, what's even cleverer here is he actually decides to play the ball back to Winks, who's running forward, and then Winks is going to play it to Mavididi. And look at the space that Mavididi's got now. There's no one around him, and on paper, he can now drive down the line. And what's really good about this system is that Winks has actually got an option, because he could also go the other side and find Fatawu. So here you can see he's got multiple options. Not only the 2 wingers, but he could go for the riskier balls and try and play in these 2 box crashers, or he could just keep advancing up the field as well. So again, this is what the system is trying to do. Generate these opportunities time and time again and make the opposition really struggle to understand what they're going to do. Here we see the attacking 5, and we can see that Mavididi is going to try and play the ball down the line, and this is where Ndidi is going to make the run in here as the box crasher. So Ndidi's got the ball, and what would happen now, as we do last season, is Ndidi would try and get to the byline, and again, you can see that all these Leicester players are going to attack the box, and we're trying to outnumber Forest and generate that positional superiority, or a player superiority from which we can score. Now, to be fair, this move doesn't really result in anything, but this is 3 minutes into the game, and this is probably one of the best moves we've already pulled off this season, which might be a bit depressing, but it shows you the difference in between what Enzo Maresca's sophisticated system was trying to achieve versus some of the attacking patterns of play that Steve Cooper was trying to organise. So why play this 3-2-4-1? Most teams are going to defend in a 4-4-2. So if you attack with 5, it means you've got 1-man superiority. And that means if you can find that spare man, there should be an easy finish. And it means it's going to panic the opposition, as they're not going to be sure who to pick up. And quite often, the goal will go in and they'll be looking at one another. Why weren't you picking him up? And the thing is, it won't even be that player's mistake. It's because there was 2 men that he had to pick up, and you can't pick up both. It's a very simple game, football, but to make it look so simple is actually quite difficult. And that's why it's such a wonderful sport. So coming more into the system, what about diagonal switches? So Fassa's got the ball here, and he's going to try and play the crossfield diagonal. Why is he going to do that? Well, this is to add a bit of variation. But it also means there's another way that we can try and attack the team. So he's going to try and play it to Mavididi, and Mavididi's going to try and head it here. And again, we're looking for this run from the box crasher. So Ndidi's going to try and run down the wing. Now, in this case, it gets pocketed by Yates, who I've got to say had a really good game for Forest. Didn't realise it was that good. But again, it shows you what we're trying to achieve here. So why are we trying to do diagonal switches? It's to try and isolate wingers 1v1. It means you're going to try and vary your attacking build-up so that the opposition doesn't just get used to doing the same thing over and over. And what we're going to see a bit later in the game is that basically Nuno won the tactical battle. Steve Cooper made some changes, and we kept trying to do the same thing over and over, and it was just too easy for them to deal with. But in this first half, that's not what we're trying to do. Trying to shift the opposition defensive block from one side to another to tire out players and create defensive lapses. And it gets out of, if you're being pressed, you can get out of that opposition pressing if you're in trouble just by hitting it long. Now, one thing I will say that I think we did miss is I could find examples of Fast playing the diagonal, but I couldn't find any examples of Justin. So JJ was playing as the left centre-back, but as we know, he's not left-footed. And so that means that he doesn't seem to play these passes as often, and it might not be as effective as playing on his right foot. I have to say I was a bit surprised we didn't get a left-sided centre-back for that reason in the summer. I think Okoli has been a good signing, and he can even use his left foot. I've even given you an example earlier. But again, neither him or JJ are a naturally left-footed player, as we had with Callum Doyle earlier in the season. Could Victor Christensen play that role? Maybe. It remains to be seen, although I don't think he's as good at playing out from under pressure like the other players in the team. Okay, one more thing, and don't worry if you're a Forest fan, we're going to come to what you did, which is really good because there was plenty to talk about. But for us, Leicester, some more. What about attacking the half space? So here's another big feature of our play. Fatawu here's got the ball. He's on the right-hand side, and he's got several things that he could do. He could drive down the wing here. He could drive inside, cut inside and have a shot, or he could play a pass into this half space here. And you can see that what Ndidi's going to do is he's going to make this run. And so this is the area we call the half space. So he's coming from midfield and trying to attack here. It's called the half space because it's neither kind of in one zone or another. It's in the middle. This is maybe something I'll explain in a future video. So he does play it into Ndidi. And now Ndidi's got the ball. He can try and get to the byline. And now he's got options. He could play the ball all the way to the other side to Mavididi, who, as you can see at the moment, is free. Although I will say that Aina here is keeping a good eye on him. And I've got to say that Mavididi was generally anonymous in this game, not his best performance. But you can also see that you've got Vardy you can potentially run in and the other box crushing 8. So again, by making this move, we're trying to shift their players around, maybe find a spare man here or here, play the ball into them, and then score the goal. However, what I will say is that we were trying to attack these half spaces, but it was very notable to me that we weren't quite getting it right in terms of the positions that people were taking up. And I'm not really that surprised because, especially for one of the players, which was Buonanotte, he'd not played in this system before. And this is something that might be a bit of a worry going forward, is that Enzo, I think, would be able to coach the players and understand where they need to stand and at what times in play to do it. But will Cooper be able to address this? I hope so, because I don't think it's that difficult to understand, but it is a bit of a nuanced art to it. So here we can see we're on the attack. We've got Buonanotte on the ball and we've got Fatawu with him. And you can see already, this is a good opportunity because look where Fatawu is. So he actually plays it into Fatawu, and Fatawu, without really looking, is going to play the ball here. Now, why is he doing that? Well, the person that we haven't mentioned here is where is Wilfred Ndidi? And to be honest with you, I'm not really sure. Because if this was last year's system, you would have a player here, which would be Ndidi, and he would be attacking here. But I guess he thinks that Buonanotte, who I guess was starting as the right-sided box crasher, should be here instead and should therefore be available to make the run in. So you can see that he plays the ball here, but it's just going to go to no one. And it makes the attack look like it's a bit stupid. But you can see Patel is like, oh, what are you doing? Why weren't you standing there? So the theory here works because we've done this many times. And if the player here gets to it, they can cut back. And we scored quite a lot of goals doing this last season. But you can see that the nuance isn't quite there. This is the first time that we've played this system this season. So it's likely that players will be rusty. Plus, you've got new players to get used to it. But that's something that you have to understand. And it's maybe one of the pros and cons of playing a system football, which is that if everyone understands the system and you execute it, you can actually get more out of your team than you would do individually. But if people don't understand the system, it can go wrong a lot easier because there's so many more parts that can go wrong. So you've got this kind of complexity versus potential versus simplicity, but consistency. That's the kind of way to think about it. So why would you attack the half spaces in the first place? Attacking players don't have to worry about thinking in split second. You know where your teammates will be. And if you think about how little time you get in professional elite sport, that can make a big difference those few seconds. It causes big problems for the opposition because you're damned if you go, i.e. chase the player that's making the run, and you're damned if you don't because someone could cut in and take a shot. It means you're going to create more spaces to engineer high quality chances, and it means you're going to create consistent chances that breed familiarity between all squad members. So once you get used to a system, on paper, you could take a player off, put another one on, and they're going to know how the system works, so you don't have to change anything, and you can get very used to doing these high quality attacking patterns. One more thing. We've got to talk about the high press, which, to be fair, was kind of similar between both teams, although Forest tended to press more in the mid-block rather than up high. So again, to get our system working, if we lose the ball, we need to win the ball back quickly. So here we can see that that's exactly what Forest do. And again, it's Yates that manages to win the ball back here over Ndidi. They were the two that were following each other all evening long. And he's going to play this into, I think it's Milinkovic. And now they're going to go on the attack. So he's going to play the direct ball. We know that Forest want to get the ball forward quickly to try and hit us on the counter. But here we can see that Okoli is going to come into view and he's going to try and win this ball off Elliot Anderson. But you can also see that there's 4 players that are trying to surround him. So once we lose the ball, we're going to try and win that ball back as quickly as possible, ideally within 7 seconds, because that means that we can keep maintaining our attack. And then if we don't manage to win the ball back, then we're going to retreat back to a defensive position. Here you can see we're just about to surround the player. We can see that Okoli gets in and makes the challenge. And actually, not only does he make the challenge, but he's going to play the ball forward to Buonanotte. This means that Buonanotte can get the ball and play it into Winks. Now Winks can play to Mavididi. Mavididi's got the ball. He plays it back into Buonanotte. And boom, all of a sudden, because of this high press, even though we were the ones that were on the defensive transition, we've caused a counter transition. And now we're on the attack. And again, look how many players we've got forward. In fact, this time around, we've not even got 5, we've got 6 because Ricardo's joining in as well. And so this was really, really good, apart from one thing. And this was a bit of a story of the game. And that's that Buonanotte, I've got to say, was rather greedy. He's got 2 options here. He could drive through and have a shot, or probably the better move, if you ask me, is to find Fatawu, or maybe even Vardy here with a little sort of sleight of touch, a nice kind of, feathered pass. He goes for the shot, but you can see where Patel is. And yes, I think that was a bit wasteful, because instead, if he plays in Patel with the 5 players in the box, we might have a better chance of scoring here. But at this moment in time, it's 0-0. So why are you going to high press? When attacking with 5, you don't have as many players to defend counter-attacks, right? As we're going to see a little bit later on, that's ultimately what Undid does. So that means that when you win the ball high up the pitch, you can sustain those attacks, you can keep them going. It saves energy and it keeps the opposition on the back foot. And is absolutely crucial to playing a system like Pep's, Enzo's, or Arteta's. You'll see that if players aren't pulling or doing the work rate, they will haul off the players immediately. That's the one thing that's absolutely unacceptable in those teams. But a really effective high press will suffocate opponents and it demoralizes them, because you can't even get into their half. And it really feels bad if you're playing this way. And you know what it's like as a supporter yourself. How many times will you have played Man City or someone like that? And you just think, I can't even see a possibility of us scoring in this game. A really well executed system can do that to you. So, okay, I've spent about 20 minutes just talking about, Leicester. But of course, who scored the first goal? It was Forest. And why was that? Unfortunately, the story of this game was defensive frailties. And you can see from the picture here that I've used Sideshow Bob. And we'll come to Mr. Sideshow Bob in a minute. But let's just talk about the first goal. So this first goal is just an absolute calamity of errors, because this is a Forest corner. They don't manage to get the ball up it. We get the ball. And we've got multiple chances to clear our lines. So first up is Buonanotte. Buonanotte's on the ball, and he's got lots of space here. He could pass the ball here, drive this way, or just belt it down the pitch if he wants to. Instead, though, he tries to shimmy inside and beat Callum HudsonOdoi. This is such a poor decision, because even if he beats HudsonOdoi, there's still 2 players on him. So it's not even a high reward from taking the high-risk situation. It's just plain stupid, to be honest with you. Instead, you can see he ends up losing the ball. And now, look, Forest are going to be able to turn the ball over, 18 yards from our goal. Very dangerous. Now, somehow we get away with this, but then in the second phase of play, the ball comes in again, and you can see Justin's on the ball. And all Justin's got to do is clear this. It doesn't matter how. He can just leather it, hoof it, throw his head at it, do whatever he wants. What he does, though, is he takes a really poor touch, and the ball ends up ricocheting out to Yates. Yates is on the ball, hits it first time, and I've got to say, it's a great finish. It shows you like the clinicality of players in the Premier League, because this is a CDM doing this, and he puts in the shot and it goes right into the bottom corner, and it's 1-0 to Forest. And that's so depressing, because before then, we were probably the better team. It was still quite an evenly contested game. I'm not going to say that we completely dominated surroundings, but the system was working. We were making nice patterns of play, and it was pretty exciting. And yet, just through some brain-dead defending, it's 1-0 and we're down. Now Forest are 1-0 up, but we now know that this is almost like a deadly situation for us, because we know that the way that Forest are going to play is they're looking to hit us on the counter-attack. And we said in the pre-match preview that there are 2 key players that do this. We're going to be Callum HudsonOdoi, but also Anthony Elanga. They're both fast, they're both skillful, and they both get in behind, and they can cause chaos when they do that. And Forest are looking to hit them as much as possible. I even showed this example in the pre-match preview. And my example here is when Leicester would be building up the ball, and what would happen is that when Forest would win the ball back, they could actually counter-attack themselves. And I'm going to show you in a moment that something very similar to this move almost happened. So here you see an example of Milinkovic winning the ball, which he did a lot in this game, playing it out straight to HudsonOdoi, which happened a lot, then playing a bit of a 1-2 between him and Moreno, and then being able to play the ball down the line. And now you've got HudsonOdoi, who's potentially beats his man. And now you've got like a 3-on-2 situation, and they could score a goal. So that's what I warned could happen if we were a bit sloppy. And similar move to that did happen. So actually in this example, Leicester were on the attack, but you can see it breaks for Forest. And this is Murillo, who was also extremely impressive in this game. And you can see where HudsonOdoi is. The ball comes to HudsonOdoi. And actually, rather than him being the one that's going to break, it's going to be Elanga. So he's got the ball and he knows exactly what to do. And it's all about the speed of the transition. So he's going to play the ball down the line really quick, and Elanga's got it. And now you can see that Forest are going to attack. They're going to charge forward with these front 3. And look how many Leicester players are caught upfield. We do at least have fast back here. But you can see, I see it showing the next move, that it's starting to get a bit sketchy, right? So Ricardo, to be fair, as the inverted player, is coming back to try and chase Elanga. You've got Fast covering him if need be. But you can see that he's already got a bit of an angle. And fair play to his positioning here of Justin, he's in the right place. You can actually see that Okoli isn't in this picture, but he was pushing up as part of a corner. So sometimes, on these transitions, not everyone's going to get back. Fair play indeed, he's still covering back to try and follow his player here. So Langa's got the ball and he's going to cross it ahead. And of course, Wood can't wait to try and get something on the ball here. Now, luckily, the cross isn't quite good enough, so nothing happens. But this was a warning shot. This was showing you how even if you've got a lot of the ball, when you're attacking, you can still be at your most vulnerable just by giving the ball away in a bad position. So it's still 1-0 to Forest at this point. But then we would see a brilliant goal from our GOAT, Jamie Vardy. But what's great about this goal is a perfect example of all the stuff that I talked about at the top of the show. So I've put liquid football here and let me guide it through to you. But again, if you look in the comments, you'll be able to really appreciate this move. And I had many friends that texted me and said, you know, despite the fact that you got beat, that first goal was a properly high quality goal from a well-structured team. It was a Chelsea fan, of course, so he knows what it's like because Enzo Maresca is there at the moment. So we start the ball with Okoli. Okoli's going to sort of just pass it around with Justin. And Okoli's got the ball again here, and he wants to play the ball into these double pivots, but you can see that at the moment, Forest are doing a good job of blocking the passing lanes into these players. So he's not going to play the pass. So he plays it out to Fass instead. And again, he's trying to drag some of the Forest players to come closer to the Leicester defenders. And eventually, now it goes back to Okoli. They fall for it. So now Anderson, he was blocking the passing lane to Winks, but now he's going to come forward to Okoli. And that means that Okoli can play the ball here to Justin. Winks is in a free position here. Justin can give it to Winks. Now you can see that Ricardo's free. So again, we're using this kind of box midfield to try and create a free man. Ricardo's got the ball, and now he can play the return pass to Winks. And now you can see that this is Dominguez, and he's kind of caught flat-footed, and Winks is going to have free, yardage of the King Power here. Free reign of the King Power. So Winks has got the ball, and now you can see the power of the system. There's 4 players that are potentially out of the attack, and they are not going to be involved in the next phase of play. So Winks is going to charge forward. You can see that there's 5 men here, but of course there's Fatau on the other side as well. So we're actually attacking with 6 here. Winks is going to play into Ndidi, and you can see that you've got Mavididi here, and you can also see Fatau on the other side. Buonanotte here too. It's going to go to Mavididi, and Mavididi is going to play the ball into the half space here. Now, what's interesting here is actually Winks that's going to attack the half space. And this is something that maybe the players need to understand, because when we did this with Maresca, we did sometimes attack with 6, but we'd only generally attack with 6 if the opposition were really parking the bus. Were Forest parking the bus? I don't think so. They were definitely looking to defend and hit us on the counter-attack. But I do feel that maybe that was something they were a bit gung-ho about. And they maybe need to remember that the next time they go forward. That you can attack, but don't go crazy in terms of attacking. I think, to be fair here, Ndidi is still back. So if there were a break and Forest got the ball back, we might not be totally screwed. As it happens, though, it works out for Leicester. Because Mavidi's got the ball. You can see Winks here. The ball's going to go into Winks. And Winks is going to play the ball first time with his left foot. So quite technical because he's a right-footed player. And you can see that we're attacking the box here with Vardy. But you could also play it into Buonanotte for a cutback. Or you got Fatau to aim for on a back post. And you can see if he could get to the back post, he'd be totally free. Potentially just to head it into the back of the net for a free tapping. But it comes to Vardy. Vardy sticks out his foot. And we actually managed to breach Forest. So even though they had an excellent defense, and I've got to say they were, again, excellent in this match, it showed you that with a well-structured team move, even a really resolute block like Forest, you can score against them. And look, whilst we still got beat, at least we can take some solace to say that we've scored in every game so far, if it's worth anything. It's a great goal from Vardy. So now it's 1-1. Now I've got to touch on Mads, because I think, without any shadow of a doubt, Mads has been the best Leicester player this season. I think he's actually been the best goalkeeper in the Premier League this season. And he gave another example of that today. And I'll just show you this one here. So this, I think, also comes off a corner for Forest. You can see the ball falls to Dominguez, and he's just going to try and hit it as hard as he can into Mads. And this just looks like a surefire goal. And yet somehow, look at this block that he pulls off. Brilliant save. He makes himself as big as possible, proper Schmeichel-esque. And I think not only does he make the save, but what's amazing is that he actually puts it out and play. Because normally when you make a save like that, you'll save it, but it ricochets out and they might score the tap in, or it kind of rolls off somewhere. So to not only be so strong, but to make sure it goes out of play to give your team time to reset was absolutely incredible. And it was notable that after he made that save, all the players ran up to him and gave him a tap to say that was as good as scoring a goal, which it was. Absolutely unbelievable save, and unlucky that Forest didn't score, or lucky for us that they didn't, because it could have been. So looking at a game, it's 1-1. But again, talking about the flow of football, we know that Forest are going to be a threat on transition. So here I've got an example of us on the attack, and you've got Ricardo now. Now he's actually moved more in front of Winks. And he's going to try and play this ball into this space here. And he can either find Ndidi or he can play Buonanotte, who's going to be running in here. And this is maybe something that Buonanotte's got to work on too, because under the Enzo system, he maybe wouldn't come this deep to necessarily play the 1-2 with Ricardo, because this should be the spot he's here. And we know that Buonanotte does like to drift around and get involved in the build-up a bit, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but just something we have to work on. So the ball comes in here, but you can see that this time the ball's going to get cut out. And I believe this is Murillo again who's going to cut it out. So he's going to cut it out and he's going to play the ball right up here, right away. And this is going to be, I think this is Chris Wood who's got the ball. And I'm also going to bring Callum HudsonOdoi. So he's now going to get the ball. And you can also see that Anthony Elanga is going to make the run here as well. So yeah, you can see that there's two wingers, even though they're not quite on either side. These are their main threat on the counter-attack. These two quick and rapid players are a real threat. And you've got to watch them like a hawk. And in fact, you can see that HudsonOdoi, he's got no one on him. So he's got a completely free run. So it's Elanga who's got the ball. And you can actually see that it's Ricky P who's going to try and chase him. The move progresses. And you can see that this is looking dangerous. So even though we've actually got 4 men back here, you've actually only got 1 man who's goal side of Elanga. No one's on Odoi. Although to be fair, you can see that Winks is looking at him. So he knows, oh, I've got to be a bit careful here. And Ricky's there. And now that Elanga's on the ball here, he's got the ball, and you can see that he's going to try and make this pass here, which if it makes it, Callum HudsonOdoi is going to be through 1-on-1. So what does that mean? It means that Ricky P's got no choice but to make the tactical foul here, really, which I think is a good choice to make. He actually ends up making it quite late, as it would happen. The pass was a bad one and it wouldn't get there, but you weren't to know. And it means it's a yellow card for Ricardo. And this would have ramifications. So in the second half, I believe it's about 65 minutes, Cooper did make a change and he took Ricardo off. But I think you had to, because we saw throughout the game how deadly Callum HudsonOdoi is. We're going to come to the second half. He was really good. And I think one of the reasons for that is that, you know, he had the beating of Fatau and Ricardo in this game. And the yellow meant it was dangerous. I will just say, just to try and be even, that Alex Moreno, who's a left back for Forest, also got booked. And so it was a similar case as well. He ended up getting taken off because he was going 1-on-1 against Fatau. And whilst you can kind of afford to do it maybe for 60 minutes, as players get tired, you can't risk someone getting red carded. So even if you have to put on a player who's maybe worse than the one that you're subbing on or off, you've just got to watch out for it. It's a game of percentages. So that's the end of the first half. Pretty even, but you can see we had a lot more possession. We slightly shaded the X goals. 1 big chance for each team. Although you probably argue that their biggest chance they didn't score from, because that amazing save from Mads, their goal was very well taken. But overall, I quite like this. I think it's a good half. It showed that, in my opinion, a system could and would work. And it was a little bit like you haven't been swimming in years, and like maybe the first time you go swimming, you're almost sort of choking a little bit on the water. But as you keep doing it, you get more familiar and you're starting to get your stride back. And I was feeling pretty confident. I knew there were going to be goals in that second half, and I knew that it could go either way, but it was finally poised, and I was really enjoying what I was seeing because it felt like the Leicester from last season. But unfortunately, in what is being a recurring theme this season, one of the halves was absolutely awful. And I think this is the worst half of football we've played all season, even worse than that first half we had against Spurs. I will say, though, that this is not on the manager. This is the only time I can say that, I think, during the whole season, but this is on the players. So just to show you this in stats, why it was so bad, you can see that in the second half, yes, we had more possession. In fact, we had even more possession in the first half, but we did absolutely nothing with it. 0 big chances. The XG was basically non-existent. Forest had loads. I still think they should have been higher because they had these 3 big chances, loads of shots. And to be honest, I felt they felt sympathetic for by the end, because at 3-1 up, they looked to see out the game. And I think they could easily, well, if they wanted to, I think they could have scored more goals. But fair play to them. They knew that Leicester weren't going to score. They'd won the battle by 3-1, as we'll see. So why did this happen? Well, we've got to talk about the Kiwi. Chris Wood, he used to play for us. He did a lot of good for us, actually. We're in the Championship, but eventually he moved on. He's ended up at Forest, and he is having the season of his life right now, amongst the race for the Premier League top scorer, which is crazy. And I got to say, I got to apologize, because I said that I thought Wood is a decent player and I thought he might score, but I didn't think he was going to be that great. But he absolutely terrorized us in the second half. So respect to the big man. Here you can see that again, we're architects of our own downfall. And what's really sad about this is look at the timing. 46 minutes is just as soon as the second half's kicked off, and we're just not at the races. So we can see that Forest are on the attack. They can try and play it around. Fass is going to try and stand at the ball. But here you can see the ball gets played into one of their players. But look, we've got the 5-man press around him, and it means that Ndidi does what Ndidi does best, and we manage to win the ball. So actually, this is really good, actually. We're defending well, the shape is working, and now we can start attacking. So Ndidi's got the ball, and he's going to play it into Winks, and Winks has got the ball. And you can see now we're looking to fast transition ourselves. So you're going to have Buonanotte making his run this direction, and Fatawu making his run this direction. And you can see that Winks is going to try and play the ball to Fatawu. But this is a pretty poor pass. And some people are saying, oh, is it Fatawu being in the wrong position? No, I'm sorry. I've watched this back multiple times. It's just a bad pass. To be fair, after this pass, we've still got plenty of time to fix things. But you have to say that it was a bit careless. And it's a giveaway when you don't need to make such a careless giveaway. So Fatawu tries to recover the ball back again with a high press, but Forest still with it. They manage to turn around, and now it comes to Callum HudsonOdoi. And he's going to be working with Elliot Anderson here, who's moved into the attacking position. Anderson receives the ball, and he's going to drive down the line. And now I'm going to circle Chris Wood. Anderson's got the ball here, and you can see that Wood, by sort of holding his run and checking, he manages to make this space against Okoli. And I think this is where Okoli could do a bit better, and he should stay tighter with his man. So it comes to Chris Wood, but I've got to say the next bit is magic. He gets the ball, does a really good turn, and the finish is absolutely clinical because he finds the bottom corner. You know, just a super finish. The keeper had no chance. And I was just shocked that this went in, to be honest with you, just because it was a good move. And again, it just you'd never see a goal scored against you like this in the Championship. In a Premier League, happens every week. So, yep, goes into the back of net, and it's 2-1. But I want to talk about, I said that Nuno won the tactical battle in this one, and I'll show you why. So, key to our build-up, as I went through that whole section in the first half, is our double pivot. And what Nuno started to do as the game went on, but he especially did at half-time, is he started attacking the Leicester build-up, and he told his players to compress around them and stop them playing through so much. So you can see that they're much closer. Again, I'm not entirely sure about Buonanotte's position, who we're trying to find here. I think he's a bit too close and maybe causing a bit of trouble. And anyway, between him and Ricardo, actually it's Forest who managed to win the ball. Breaks here, and they manage to win the ball, and immediately they're going to try and transition as fast as possible. They're not interested in possession. They're about getting it forward as fast as possible and try and exploit the gaps that the other team has left at the back. So the ball's going to get played through here. You can see Callum HudsonOdoi is already on his bike. He's got the ball, and now he's going to drive. And this is exactly what you don't want, because he's a really skillful player, and it's going to cause you a decision. He gets the ball, drives again, and he decides to have a shot. And we're really lucky. He hits the outright of the post, upright even. Could easily have been a goal. Really great play. And you can just see the whole sequence in this move. This is less than 10 seconds from winning the ball back to them almost scoring. That's how fast he can go. If you blink, you'll miss it. Really good play from them. And this is because they were disrupting our double pivot in the build-up. So it's 2-1 to Forest. We've had a bit of a warning sign there. We've really got to wake up. And then unfortunately, Wout Faes, who I've got to say has been good for Leicester, I think, for at least 8 or 9 months. But the problem with him is, he's someone that's got a mistake in him, especially it seems in the Premier League. And unfortunately, this was a game to forget for him. So the ball's just trundling back here to the goalkeeper. There should be nothing to be scared about in this position. But Sell steps out, and he's going to just go direct. And he's going to try and hit Chris Wood immediately. And normally, I think why they would try and do this is maybe he's going to try and win the physical battle, or maybe play it into one of the wingers on either side. But what happens here is Wout Faes, who unfortunately I've got to say has a history of doing this kind of thing, completely misjudges the flight of the ball and tries some weird header, and it does nothing. Is he trying to head it back to the goalkeeper? I think that's what he's trying to do. Maybe he should try and clear it, but I guess last week he almost scored an own goal trying to do that. Maybe he's just got to head it back the way it came and then try and win the second ball. He does just the worst possible thing, heads it up, it goes to Wood, and Wood's on it immediately. Because Mads has stepped out, maybe you could say, should Hermansen have come deeper to try and claim the ball here himself? I don't really think so. So Wood's going to get here, and he's going to just loft the ball over Hermansen, and you can see it's going to end up in the back of the net. And Hermansen's super angry. He's looking at Okoli, but it's not Okoli's fault, mate. It is Wout Faes. He just completely let the team down. And it's 3-1. And to be honest with you, at this point in time, it's game over. And I've got to say, the thing for me that was depressing about this game in the second half is what happened to the players. Why did they give up? They made 2 individual mistakes. They were terrible by themselves, yes. But you know what? You can lose 3-1, but still try and give a go of yourself. Try and, get involved, win the 50-50s. To be honest with you, once it's in, I think Wout Faes especially, his body language is really petulant. Look, I get it. Maybe it's one of those where you're angry at yourself rather than your teammates, but it wasn't very classy. And I was just really disappointed from this point on we never looked like scoring in a month of Sundays. Where are the substitutes? I mean, to be fair, we made a few substitutes. So around 68 minutes, he made 3. He brought on Bilal, he brought on Ayew, and he brought on Samare for some reason. You can see, of course, Forest made the full complement of 5. Again, I would say that's a difference that, you know, why are you not making all 5 substitutes, especially when you're trying to chase the game? It feels a bit weird. You can see with them what they ended up doing is they did replace one winger. They replaced the striker, but actually they put on another defensive midfielder, a Morata or a centre back, depending on how you want to classify him. And that's the right move to make. Why not? You've won the game. You just need to see it out at that point in time. And they're so good defensively that they could be confident they're going to do it. This is what our team looked like after the substitutions. So Ayew came on in place of Mavididi. El Khanous has come on up here in the attacking midfield position. Who's he come off for? Yeah, Ricardo. So actually what the difference is, Soumare's come on for Ndidi, but drops back. We're no longer playing an inverted player at all. So we're just playing a kind of 3-2-4-1. And we're kind of lucky that Forest didn't really attack because there were going to be loads of spaces down both sides playing this way. But we're trying to force something, being a bit desperate. But of course, I mentioned this in the pre-match preview. There was no way through. Forest defenders were really good. However, what I've got to say, which I think was really, really stupid from us, is that I called this out pre-match preview and anyone could figure this out. The Forest defenders are elite in the air. If you're trying to attack them in the air, you're not going to have much joy. Technically, we did score the first goal from the air, but it wasn't a header. It was going for like a high boot. That's a bit different. Instead, what we were doing is just pointless crosses. So here we can see we've got Justin. He's actually appeared on the left-hand side and he's going to go for a cross. Now, fair play. He actually plays this with his left foot, right? But because it's a left-footed cross and he's not a left-footed player, needless to say, it's not the greatest cross in the world. But to be honest with you, even if it is a good cross, look at the physical height that Forest have got here. And it means Milinkovic, he just eats these for breakfast. You're never going to beat him to the head. Who even in the Leicester team is going to win this header? Maybe Ndidi, who isn't even on the pitch at this point in time. So this is absolutely pointless. Now, is this on the manager or is this on the players? I think there's a little bit of both. The players did try some moves along the ground, but I mean, I was just very frustrated that our response to trying to get a goal back into the game was just to try and hoof it aimlessly into the box over and over. I don't think the Forest defenders broke a sweat. They must have been absolutely loving it. It was just stupid. And what happened to that fluency from the first half and what we're trying to achieve? You got to think about the system. Here we're going to see another one. We've got Ayew on the ball, 1-on-1. The problem with Ayew, I like him as a player, but he's never going to beat this guy, Aina, who had a really good game, I've got to say, 1-on-1 and beat him down the wing because he's not that type of player. I think that was a weakness in our signings in the summer, that who's going to come on the winger positions if, you know, Fatau or Mavididi are injured. It's going to be a bit tricky. So instead, Ayew's got the ball. He's going to cut in. You can even see his body language. So he's like, what's happening? Where are you guys? What am I supposed to do with the ball? To be fair, Ayew's not used to playing this system. So that's something that he's got to recognize how to do it. So he's just going to go for a cross. And this is just a super pointless. What's he even trying to do here? Is this Buonanotte, who's one of our shortest players that he's aiming for? Sells just says, thank you very much. I'll gobble that up all day, every day. And I can play out. And so that was it. Second half, it ended. Pathetic second half. Forest deserved to score at least 2 that half. Maybe they could have got more. But look at our XG. We didn't even lay a glove on them. That was the most disappointing thing because we still had 11 men versus 11. We should have been fresher than them and they just all fell apart. So it ends 3-1. Going to go on to the match ratings that SofaScore give us. And you can see that lots of Forest players had strong games. Chris Wood, man of the match. HudsonOdoi, who I've mentioned many times, had a high rating. Elanga didn't, but I felt he was very good. I will give a shout out to Yates, who I think had a really good game. And not just the goal, but all round. He was involved in many things. As for Leicester, well, I think the story is you can see down our right-hand side, their left, that both Ricardo and Abdul Fatau just couldn't deal with HudsonOdoi. He had the better of both of them. Fass had the disaster class. I don't know why Mads had such a poor rating. Maybe they think he could have done better on that third goal, but I'm not having that. I think he was really good all round. But Justin, again, a defensive mistake for that first goal too. Indeed, he not at his best either. So overall, you know, fairly poor performances from most of the team. What are my kind of closing thoughts then for this match? It was a great first half, but a horrendous second. I cannot stress how bad that second one is. In fact, I kind of glossed over a little bit just because I'm so frustrated about it. But it's just like, what was that all about? I hope the players take a lot of accountability for this because I think that they asked to play this particular system, which, by the way, I agree with, but they got their wish and they didn't perform to the expectations that they should set for themselves. I didn't expect to see Cooper's system, but I was delighted to see it, I will say that. However, abject, awful defending handed Forest 3 points. And what I would say with Cooper, I know so a lot of Forest fans were like, Cooper can't manage an attacking setup. And you know what? That might be true, to be fair. But what I will say is that you can't blame him when you make 3 calamitous errors like that. It doesn't matter if you're Guardiola. If your team's going to throw away goals like that, can't win any match. Got to say, Forest are a very well-drilled side, and they ran out easy winners. The players remember the system. That much was clear because they were able to recreate the patterns of play from last season. But they know the intricacies to improve it? Like where exactly you've got to stand, how it changes on the game state. Like I mentioned, attacking sometimes with 6, which might have been a bit too cavalier. And here's kind of my point. Is I guess I fear that Cooper doesn't understand how the system works, and therefore he's going to be unable to coach players like Bonanotte and El Canous or even Ayew. So the thing is that during the week, you need to look at the videos and say, okay, here are all the things we did right. Here's all the things that we did wrong. Work with those players individually and get them to stand in the right place at the right time and press at the right time. But does he know that? I don't know. Are there like PowerPoint slides like I'm showing you now in the Leicester Vault that he can go and access and see what it's like? I'm not sure. And I think, to be fair, Wolfie from Forest Fan TV came on one of our shows and he says, Steve Cooper doesn't know how to coach an attacking setup, and it failed with Forest, and he thinks it will fail with Leicester too. And he would be more worried if if we played against Forest a defensive low block rather than trying to come at them. So that's food for thought. Now, I personally think overall that this was just a bad day in the office, especially that second half in terms of just brain fart errors. I want to see us play this way against Ipswich, and I would even try it for a few more games too. I think there will be a big divide amongst the fan base of some people who say, look, if we try and play Enzo's system in the Premier League, we'll get killed. And what happened to Burnley last season will happen to us. And maybe overall you'll be right. But the truth is we don't know that. We tried Cooper's system, whatever that was, his weird 3-2-5 of the fullback thing, for 8 games, and it was kind of mediocre. We've tried this system now for 1 game, and we had 1 really good half of it. We had 1 terrible half of it. So I would suggest that we've got to keep with this for the same amount of games. So 7 more games and see where we get with it. If by then we're conceding a lot and it's not working, that's a different story. And look, I will say that Nuno shows you the alternative as to what we could play, which is you could go for a more simple system that will still be effective and could still work. And we could probably play that way. I'm not saying we could play as good as them, but we could play a very similar style. We've got 2 fast wingers who can be deadly on transition. We've got good central defensive midfielders, and we've got, sizable centre halves that can win aerial battles and things like that. And look, this season is all about staying up. That's what we know. However, I would say that playing this system, like I say, has got the higher ceiling. My final point is that this particular system, the inverted fullback, is reliant upon Ricardo. So we took Ricardo off, but we didn't even play an inverted fullback, which we got away with. But what are we going to do in the future? Now, the player who did it last season, even though a lot of people don't like him, was Hamza Chowdhury. He was the one that played in the cup games, or if Ricardo was injured, would come into the team to play in that inverted position. Now, fair play, you might get away with that in the Championship, but not in the Premier League. But it's something that we've got to think about. Could Skip do it? Don't know. Could Ndidi learn to do it? Don't know. Maybe don't even want to do that. But that could be a problem if we're going to play this system. And I think it's pretty obvious that the players themselves do want to play this system. And I still think that first half shows you that it's worth pursuing for some time to come. Just going to quickly round off the show with then the results in the table. So as it turns out, it probably wasn't that terrible for us. Ipswich lost an incredible game 4-3 to Brentford. They conceded in the 97th minute and then hit the bar, I think, in the 98th. Crazy game. Wolves, this is another crazy game. Fair play to them. They got a point. 2-0 down. And then what happened in the last minutes of the game is Brighton had a 4-on-1 to make it 3-1. They played the pass to the 1 from the 4. And then Wolves went down the other end in the same passage of play and scored to make it 2-2. What a crazy game. They get a point out of absolutely nowhere. So they get a bit closer. Man City beat Southampton, but fair play to Southampton. They kept it pretty, low scoring, but no points ultimately. And Everton, they got an equaliser near the end to get a point against Fulham. Fair play to them. So at the moment, here's what the table looks like. You can see Leicester, we remain in 14th on 9 points. 9 points from 9 games, though. I mean, I've still said that if we get 38 points from 38 games, I think that will probably be enough to keep us up. I just hope there won't be any more nasty deductions. We might still stay up even with deductions on 38 points. I think we should be aiming for 42, 43, but that's still a decent return right now. Fair play to Forest. They're up. They were actually up to 5th. They've dropped 1 place to 6th. I'm guessing on goals scored, but very impressive from them. Look, they're ahead of both Chelsea and Spurs, although they've got a game in hand, which is impressive. Looking at the bottom table, Southampton are rooted to the bottom. Wolves picked up a point, but we're still 7 clear. Palace are playing on Monday night. Ipswich, who we play next, there's still a 5-point gap, but that is a huge game. We've got to get something out of that minimum. A loss is trouble. So yeah, talking about these next 5 games, well, 1 down, 4 to go, 0 out of 15 so far. Ipswich is the one that I think we'd expect to try and get something from. United, we don't have a good record at their ground. Chelsea at home, I still think Maresca will eat us for breakfast. The Brentford one's an interesting one. I don't know what to expect from that one. I could see us getting a draw. I think they would definitely be favourites, but I wouldn't say it's impossible to grab something. But this is a harder run of fixtures, that's for sure. So that's it. Quite a long one for this one, but I really wanted to go into the Enzo system. As I said, give the Foxes Talk link a click to see everything in a bit more detail. Let me know what you think. I know I'm going to probably get a lot of comments from the Forest fans, probably trolling me. Please try and keep the language clean. Fair play. You won this one. You got to admit when the other team was better. As for Leicester, I was glad to see the return of Enzo's system. I want to see us stick with it. I think it needs a bit of fine tuning. Can Cooper do it? I did hear it got toxic at the King Power at full time, but at least he has gone back to the system. I think he's wasted a lot of games getting to this point, and it still remains to be seen if he's going to be here throughout the season. But I think there's still something about our team. I still think we've got a lot of quality, and we do have what it takes to stay up. So that's it. Thank you very much for listening. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Consider giving it a like. And I'll see you around for the next match, which will be Ipswich. Take care, everyone, and goodbye.